Cary Sparrow, what's your superpower and how does that serve your mission to help other people?
Believe it or not, one of my superpowers is humility. I learned when I founded my company that most of what I thought was wrong. And my kids remind me of that every day. And so rather than be offended or defensive about that, I've learned to embrace it and use it to help prioritize. If you know going in that any direction you sent is based on some assumptions that are to differing degrees wrong, you approach things in a very different way that is much more about resiliency and discovery. And so that's what I, incorporate every day. Having kids brings out the humility in you because God knows they have no problem pointing out your faults in a way that is not undeniable. So that's actually served me pretty well running the business.
Completely relate to that. I have 3 of my own and they have a way of keeping us humble, don't they? And they throw enough curveballs at us to keep us on our toes. That's for sure.
What's interesting is I was not always that way. I've had to grow into that. But I would say over the last 15 years, that's really kind of served me well to take me into new places.
Nice. Very good. Appreciate you being open to that. Flywheel leadership is about discovering and practicing the leadership systems that bring out the best in each of us and our teams. Cary, are there any stories from your experience that come to mind that exemplify exceptional or unique styles in leadership?
The most effective leaders I've seen have been the ones who've put really talented people around them. So selecting your own team really, really carefully is an important start. I think then creating an environment where everybody feels valued, understands how they're contributing, where there's interdependency. So it's not everybody is a cog in a machine. And there's kind of a personal relationship glue that holds that together. And I'm talking about like the leadership team level for folks. Those are the things that I've seen the best leaders really focus on.
Very good. Any specific leaders that made an impact on you in your career or life?
My first boss in the Navy had a profound impact on me. He's not around anymore, but he brought a really effective style of development and accountability, right? So falling short, you knew it. Getting up to where you needed to be and then positioned to where you need to be in the future. He was a master at that. So he combined both, right? He was a firm hand and also a firm guide. And that made a huge difference on me. I was like 24 years old in a position of, I was on a submarine as an officer, responsible for operating nuclear power plants. And so I had a lot of responsibility in a very demanding environment, and it helps to have a really strong boss who sets a great example.
No doubt. Would love to learn a little bit more about you and WageScape. Could you share a little bit about the company and your role in that?
Yeah. So fast forward, 25 years, going from the Navy through a variety of different roles, on the private side. So first, big consulting firms, then big corporations, and founded WageScape for a really geeky premise, which is I felt that data about jobs and pay and the ability, what's going on in the labor market was not nearly as good as it could be. In fact, it was just downright awful in a lot of cases. And I felt that there was a better way to do it. So 10 years ago, I founded WageScape with the purpose to bring more transparency to the labor market. It reflected my kind of geek at heart personality. And along the way, we've built a way for folks to see what's happening in real time anywhere around the world, with hiring, with pay, with skills, cut through any dimension that you want, by any industry, any level, any geography, any skill set. So you can see and anticipate what do you need to do in order to attract and especially keep the talent that you need to be effective as a business leader. So that's what we did. We created a really, powerful technical platform that gets data from nearly 1 million different, sites every day, to put together a complete view of what's happening with hiring and pay worldwide, over 200 countries. And then we package that in a way that can be used by different audiences in different ways. And from a business standpoint, we developed, commercial models that make it easy for companies to work with us.
Nice. I spent nearly 20 years in talent recruitment industry, so I completely understand some of the value and tremendous insights that are gleaned from data like this. But I would love to understand a little bit deeper on, like, how does that show up with the clients you're working with? Like, where do they find the most value, and how do you engage with them? Is it them just working on a platform, or are you, actually working with them hand in hand in some way? Anything like that would be helpful to understand.
So nearly all of our clients have their own ability to act on the data that we provide to them, right? So we don't, even though I've got a pretty extensive consulting background, we don't offer consulting as a service. We do consulting with clients, but we just call it customer support, right? So
Yeah.
it's helping clients get the most out of the information. Our clients range. There's all kinds of degrees of need, all kinds of degree of sophistication within their organizations. They range from very large companies that have analytics teams and big data lakes with data, large data sources. And ours becomes one of those. And in that case, we just give them access to our underlying data warehouse, and they pull in the data they need. And we're talking about massive quantities of data, like 30 million new jobs every month, revisions to existing jobs, and so forth. That ranges all the way then down to small departments that don't need all that data. They want something that's much more insightful on specific questions. And there we provide a range of dashboard products and reporting products that help people see exactly what they need to see at exactly the time they need to see it, without all the necessity of kind of the analytic capability that if they just wanted to access the raw data, the source data.
Very good. Let's talk about the labor market. Like, what do you see in the labor market, and specifically anything maybe that's changed during your time with WageScape?
Oh, over the last 10 years, lots has changed. Lots have changed. We started off in an environment where hiring was pretty stable. So this was back, 10 years ago. Hiring was pretty stable. Pay raises were pretty stable, typically in the 2% to 3% range. And the only companies that really needed heavy duty insights were big companies with big footprints, where they wanted to know not just what to pay people, but they wanted to know insights on what all their competitors were doing, which is another thing that we do, is tell people, here's what every one of your competitors for any given job are doing in terms of their hiring and their pay and the skills they're looking for and so forth. Well, that's where we started from. And we started providing data for folks that had their own products and services that our data got built into. We still do that. The pandemic hit 5 years ago. And so going on 6, and everything went out of bounds. And we saw it instantly with our data because we track what's going on every day. So we knew which companies had stopped hiring, how fast they had stopped hiring, how fast they resumed hiring, and so forth. And when I say it went out of bounds, the hiring patterns went out of bounds and the pay patterns went way out of bounds. Suddenly, a lot of industries were short on talent, and it was mission critical for them. It was a crisis. And they, for the first time in my career, just threw down the gloves and started throwing lots of money at hiring people. Wage inflation went up. Advertisers' wage went up an average of 30% a year for the first 2 years after the lockdown first happened in the U.S. 30% a year. We go from less than 3% a year to 30%. That's unbelievable. But also, it was not across the board. In fact, it was hugely variable. There were some parts of the country that advertised wages were going up over 100%. There were others where they were dropping a little bit. So not only did you have this crisis in wage inflation, but now everybody was flying blind because not only was there no reliable sources at a macro level because things were changing so fast. But also there was no reliable source of intelligence at a local level because everything was set up. In the past, you didn't need to know what was going on locally if the average was a couple percent. Now it was really important to know what was going on locally. And so then that kind of data became more important. And then everybody realized what they had just bitten off. And 3 to 4 years after the pandemic, they started hitting the brakes. They started realizing that the cost associated with the wages that they now were offering was very uncomfortable, maybe not untenable yet, but very uncomfortable. The employment situation had changed, so the supply of labor was starting to loosen up a little bit. Still high, relatively historically high unemployment, but not the crisis level that you saw during the pandemic. So the need to pay as much was starting to come down. The ability to pay in a more sophisticated way was starting to go up. So you started to see advertised wages come down and starting to match more closely. We're still, though, at the estimates vary, but we're still seeing, well over 5% increase in advertised wages, which is more than the planned raise in pay that companies are reporting, which is running about 3.5% this year, according to World at Work, which tracks these things. So it's started to come back down, but it's gotten a lot more nuanced now. So now companies, especially companies with workforces that are highly what we call wage sensitive, meaning that if they see another job that pays 50 cents an hour more, they will take it, much more likely to take it than they were prior to the pandemic, because we're still dealing with the effects of inflation, and 50 cents an hour makes a big difference to how much food you can put on the table and the trade-offs you have to make in terms of what you pay for and what you decide to go without. So, in that situation, companies are much more concerned now about what's going on in the locations around their location. So they're getting a lot more local, and they're having to get, a lot more inventive about how they stay on top of what they actually have to pay. And so you see things like annual pay reviews are no longer the norm in many companies. In fact, I would say most companies. Now you're looking at least semi-annual, and for those kinds of companies with big hourly populations, you're looking at least quarterly, where wages are monitored and pay processes can be updated. So that's a pretty big change from what we'd seen before. Companies are now, the other big change that has not been anywhere close to digested yet is AI. So just the last couple of years, AI has started to trickle in to functionality for enterprise systems. It's made more inroads in terms of information sources, like going out and, Googling, you'll get AI capabilities that are linked into that. AI models are typically freely available. The quality of the answer, if you ask them to put me a daily vacation plan for a trip I've got coming up in Hawaii, they tend to do a pretty good job of that. If you ask me how much should an HVAC technician in Cedar Rapids, Iowa be paid at a journeyman level, if you ask 3 different AI models, you're going to get 3 completely different answers on that. Right. And so there's still a big evolution there, but the adoption is going up. This year, we're going to start to see that even more. And that's going to have a couple of implications. It's going to have an implication in terms of the way the companies manage their workforce and the way they manage everything else, frankly, and also the way that they're set up. And so already companies we saw this from the recruiters, where you mentioned your experience with recruiting. We have a number of clients that are recruiters. We're involved in recruiting associations and large recruiting groups. And so we stay in very close contact with what's going on with the recruiting audience. And they started reporting probably, a number of quarters ago that things were slowing down. And when you ask them, what's underneath it, there was a hesitancy. People were not firing so much. And so even though some high profile layoffs were making it in the news, in general, you weren't hearing a ton about firing, but they were seriously slowing down their hiring. So not as much firing, but not as much hiring either. And so you're starting to get this kind of stagnation, which, by the way, is making it hard for people who are between jobs, or people who are just coming out of school to find jobs, right? But they're holding back, they're keeping their powder dry because a lot of uncertainty, political uncertainty, economic uncertainty, and now AI uncertainty. And more companies are building into their plans expectations on how AI is going to be able to reduce the workload of parts of the organization. We're going to start to see that take a foothold in this year's, through this year's spending. And I think that trend's going to accelerate as we look ahead for the next few years. People talk about how AI is going to create more jobs. It's going to allow people to do more interesting things, all of which I firmly believe. But I think the reductions in jobs are going to come first and are going to be more noticeable.
Yeah, that pain may come, or it maybe is coming on the front end a lot more compared to the longer term view, right?
Yeah.
Cary, you bring up something that's really important that it doesn't get talked about a lot is replacement rates, right? Versus, downsizing, layoffs, terminations, right? That's always big in the news on the terminations, the layoffs, but a lot of times see all those job postings out there, right? And how many actually get filled? Or when somebody does leave, does that role still get replaced by somebody that is a person? First of all, that's a question nowadays. And is it a person at the same level, lower level, or what?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it varies depending on kind of the roles and the industries that you're in. But in general, here's what we're seeing. First of all, people aren't leaving at the same rate. They know it's a much more uncertain market for jobs, and so they're sticking with jobs. So that's one thing. Companies, especially, we've looked at what's going on at a number of different jobs. And over the last 2.5 years, what's been happening is that in a lot of cases, a greater proportion of companies are advertising lower rates than they did the year before for the same job. So they're doing two things. One is they're going back to lower starting wages. And this isn't all companies. We track the proportion of companies where wages for a given job are going up, are staying the same, or going down. And over the last 3 cycles we did this, the number of companies that are lowering their wages for the same job is going up, meaning a greater proportion are cutting back on what they're paying to start with. And so we're seeing, that's going on. And we know that even though the number of job ads has continued to go up, to your point, we're tracking, compared to what we were doing 10 years ago, we're tracking over twice the number of job ads in the US per month than we were. But the hiring rates aren't really changing that much, not to the same degree, right? And, unemployment is higher than it was pre-pandemic, but it's still low from a historic standpoint. So companies, it's kind of this like stagnant situation where companies aren't hiring as much, employees aren't leaving as much. There's a lot of uncertainty that's affecting both sides of that equation. And we're talking, just for the audience, we're talking now in January of 2026, right? So this has been going on for the better half of last year. And I think it's much more kind of poignant right now.
For sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That replacement, are you replacing it with an agent, or you're replacing it with a person? And what does that rate really look like? That's an interesting question.
I don't know how AI is going to impact replacement, because AI, basically, its work processes are going to be redesigned around AI and work, right? So there's going to be a number of employees where their work is going to change because AI agents are now available to them. And so in that case, their productivity is going to go up. They'll either be able to do new things, or they'll be able to increase their scope of coverage, meaning that if their colleague leaves, it's not going to get replaced. When work processes are changed in a significant way, you're going to start to see layoffs, because entire groups of employees are going to be impacted by that.
Cary, how are you seeing this shape up with leaders? Like, how is this changing their mindset on how they acquire talent or decisions they make in regards to labor?
A lot of folks are still stuck. And a lot of folks are, a lot of times when there's ambiguity, people just kind of freeze. And I think there's a lot of that's going on right now. I think that there are a number of companies that have major initiatives underway looking at how to bring AI in. And the business case is really simple in a lot of cases, which is just straight headcount reduction. In some cases, it's about revenue creation, which is important, obviously, but there's a lot of work going on looking at more efficiency, right? Which is going to translate into headcount. And so there's those kinds of initiatives, but in terms of how individual leaders are adapting kind of their approach to today's labor market, I think AI is its own category of issues that they have to deal with. And I don't think I mean, when I talk to leaders about this, about their personal views, I still get a ton of people that don't trust AI.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it doesn't matter. My response is the worst AI is ever going to be from now on is today. It's only getting better at what it does. So you have to build that into your thinking. It may not meet your needs today, but there's a real chance it's going to meet a lot of them in a lot faster time than you're expecting. So you can't ignore it. You have to build that into your plans. You don't necessarily know how it's going to show up. I'll give you an example that's real personal to me. We started a whole new product development about a year and a half ago when models like ChatGPT were coming on. It was pretty clear that it was a super easy interface, but we needed to layer it onto our data. We have tons of massive data set, right? And so we needed to layer it onto that, and it needed to extract all the data, and there needed to be a coding layer where it figured out how to code the right things, and it needed to have a presentation layer where it created all kinds of great charts and everything that, filters and so forth. And the technology was not there. We were basically, the base technology was getting upgraded every month. So you can't do a product development, like that with the base technology changing every month. So I canceled the project. I said that the technology is going to catch up to what we want to do. And it has, frankly, as of about 8 months ago. You can go out and get the tech that does everything we needed to do. And you can do it at a fraction of the cost with almost none of the development costs associated with that. So, that's something that I learned firsthand that I think a lot of leaders still don't have their heads around yet. I'll tell you, the ones who really get it is this growing group of folks who are fractionals. The fractional executives really get this because now they can do the work of an entire department using AI, and they're highly motivated to figure out how to do that. So I've got a lot of friends who are fractionals. I'm old enough where, my next career step could very easily be fractional, whatever. Right. And I got a lot of friends who beat me to that. And we talk all the time about the kinds of things AI can do for them. And if you're a fractional chief marketing officer, you can have the capability of an entire marketing department and PR firm at your beck and call with minimal time investment on your part through AI agents. Same thing with sales when you talk about revenue ops. Same thing with if you need administrative support, you've got agents that can do all of that. Certain types of operations support, definitely a lot of recruiting support, all can be done now. And so folks that are starting a small organization and looking to grow it are adopting AI capabilities really fast based on my own experience.
I would agree with that. I've seen that quite a bit. I haven't thought of it in that way, but I've had a fair amount of experience with fractionals as well. And, of course, small business owners, things like that. And the adoption is some out of necessity in some cases, but also out of just that willingness to just shift gears, iterate, change course, add in different types of capabilities because they've got to in order to, whether that's survive or thrive, right? So, definitely.
Yeah,
no doubt. When you see what's going on in the labor market, AI, and the near future of your organization, like how do you see the relationship with clients changing? Do you see that continuing forward as is, or do you think that's going to shift quite a bit in the next couple of years in how you engage with your clients?
Even as recently as I would say 6 months ago, we had a segment of clients, and especially potential clients that did not at all trust data that had been through any kind of AI engine. Now I would say that there's a growing segment of clients that expect that to have happened. And they expect us to have the capabilities to curate that effectively. So we're seeing a greater willingness to adopt insights coming from AI, as long as there's a clear understanding of how those are developed, where the source data is coming from for it. And that's really one of our big opportunities, frankly, is because we are the source data for that. That's our business. And so if you want reliable data on what's happening with pay and hiring, you can go scan the web yourself, and you're going to get lots of different views of the world. If you want it all in one place that's been heavily curated, you come to us, right? And so we've seen that our whole business pipeline has been shifting over the last 9 months to go much more towards feeding AI capabilities. And that's pretty exciting for us.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. I know when people will say, well, what's the market value for this role? It's like, well, what's your source, right?
Right. So, that's exactly it. That's why I say go out and ask 3 different models that same question. You're going to get 3 wildly different answers.
Yeah, you can almost find the answer you want if you go about it just finding random sources.
Right. And if you're responsible for making those decisions, then that's really dangerous, right?
Yeah.
Really dangerous. So
yeah, for sure. What's something that I haven't asked you that you'd like to talk more about? Anything that comes to mind that maybe we haven't touched on from this conversation?
Well, we've touched on a lot, frankly. We've touched a lot on the labor market and a lot on how WageScape kind of fits in that. And, that's where we are right now. We've got good tailwinds from a business standpoint that folks are recognizing traditional sources of information aren't cutting it by themselves. And we fill an important need from that standpoint. So, and the adoption's going up, and AI has thrown another wrench in things that societally, organizationally, and from my business standpoint, all represent, not just ambiguity, but opportunity.
Very good. Cary, what's the best way for the audience to follow your work, reach out to you, learn a little bit more about what WageScape does?
Yeah, the easiest way to get more insight on WageScape is just go to our website. And then we're also online with a whole bunch of videos. So wagescape.com, or, go out to one of the video sites or one of the podcast sites and you can learn even more about us. If you want to reach me directly, the easiest way is just send me a note on LinkedIn.
Very good. Very good. Cary, what do you want those you've worked with to say about your impact on them?
Oh, for me, it's much more personal. The way that I approach my impact on the people I work with is very much like that story about the kid on the beach where the tide's gone out and there's all kinds of starfish. And the old man is watching this kid throw one starfish at a time back in the ocean. And he's like, there's millions of starfish, you're never going to make a difference. And the kid picks up the next one and throws it back and says, well, I made a difference to that one. And he goes on to the next one. That's how I view the impact I have on the people around me, is one at a time. So what are they going to say? They're going to say, in whatever way has made sense to them, that I made an impact on their lives that they appreciated.
Cary Sparrow of WageScape, excuse me. That is a great place to end. Thanks for sharing.
Yep. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure talking.
Take care.